What is going on, everybody? Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason, and in today's video, we're going to be previewing and predicting Week 15 of the 2023 CFL season. Can't believe we're in Week 15 already. Only 6 weeks left in the CFL season, I do believe. So the season's just flying by, but with that said, let's get into it. So starting off Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, we have the 10-1 Toronto Argonauts visiting the 6-6 Montreal Alouettes. A rematch, of course, of last week's game where the Toronto Argonauts won 39-10. And I think with this matchup, everybody's going to be looking for a big bounce back from Montreal in this one. They have most notably lost all of their games against Toronto, BC, and Winnipeg this season. 0-6 on the year, 6-0 against everybody else. Sound like a broken record, but that is the reality of their season. They need to prove that they can beat one of these teams, and the Argos are the team they're going to have to go through in order to get to the Grey Cup. Now, the two players that I'm watching in this one, Toronto, wide receiver DeMonte Coxey, big-bodied target, has kind of went quiet a little bit the last several weeks here, but Cam Phillips, another key receiver that they have, is out of the lineup for this game, so I'm expecting him or somebody else in that receiving core to step up. I think Coxey is a likely target for that. And then for Montreal, it's simply quarterback Cody Fajardo. Look, the Alouettes offense just has not been good enough over the last handful of weeks, so I think they need to show some more explosive plays, put a lot more points on the board in this one if they want to keep up with a high-flying Argos offense. So in terms of who is going to win this game, I think that, again, lopsided matchup on paper, but I think Montreal being at home, the fact that it's a back-to-back, you usually don't see two blowouts on back-to-back games when the same teams play each other back-to-back. So I think this game is going to be a much closer game, but ultimately, like I said, I don't have much faith in the Alouettes offense right now. Even with Cam Phillips out for Toronto, I think the Argos still have far too much firepower for the Alouettes to handle. So I'm going to take the Argos to win this game 24-17. Now moving on to the second game of Friday's doubleheader at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, we have the 3-10 Edmonton Elks visiting the 6-6 Saskatchewan Roughriders. Very intriguing game to me. I think this is the game of the week for me. And in terms of the players I'm watching in this one, Edmonton, I'm going with kicker Dean Faithfull. Look, he's a guy that I've criticized throughout the season, the decision to go with him as their full-time kicker. A guy that hadn't really kicked too much in big games before in terms of like college football or anything like that. Chris Jones said himself before the season he didn't trust him beyond 40 yards, but he made some big kicks down the stretch last week for Edmonton, including the game-winning field goal, which I believe was a 40-plus yarder. So good on Dean Faithfull. If he has to make a big kick in this one, I'm starting to have a little bit more faith, if you will, pun intended, in Faithfull to make that kick. So I think at the end of the day, he could play a big role for this team, obviously with Trey Ford and Kevin Brown really cooking the last several weeks for Edmonton. There's a lot of hope around the organization, but the kicking game could play a big role as it did the previous two matchups between these two teams this season, which were very, very close. Now, in terms of the player I'm watching for Saskatchewan, wide receiver Keon Schaefer-Baker, he's made a handful of really good plays the last several weeks, but I'm looking for him to have that big statement game and really become that true number one receiver we were seeing him develop into last year before he had that injury late last season. So I think I'm looking forward to seeing if he can really carry the offense in this one, be a guy that can create yards after the catch for the Roughriders and help Jake Dolegala out after a rough performance from the offense last week in Winnipeg. Now, in terms of who is going to win this game, I'm really, really excited for this one. Like I said, I think it's going to be very, very close. Obviously, Saskatchewan, a very tough place to play, but the two matchups between these two teams this season have come right down to the wire, and that is when Taylor Cornelius was the quarterback for the Edmonton Elks. So I'm going to believe that the Elks will win this game. I'm going to take them to win 27-23 and keep their slim playoff hopes alive. Now turning over to Saturday's doubleheader, starting at 4 p.m. Eastern, we have the 10-3 Winnipeg Blue Bombers visiting the 5-7 Hamilton Tiger Cats. And this game is notable because last year, Winnipeg went into Hamilton and absolutely got torched unexpectedly by Dane Evans, who of course is not there anymore for Hamilton. But it's worth noting that it looks very similar to last year, very lopsided matchup on paper, but maybe there's a surprise here from Hamilton and they put up more of a fight here. But really interested to see how this one turns out. In terms of the players that I'm watching for in this one, running back Brady Oliveira for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, having a special season for them. I think if he continues this pace, he could get himself into the MLP conversation, not just the most outstanding Canadian conversation, which I believe he is the favorite for at this point. And then for Hamilton, I'm going with wide receiver Tim White, who's on a heater right now. The last 4 weeks, he's really picked it up. And I think last week was his best game of the season, 180 yards against the Ottawa Redblacks. Let's see if he can do the same against a very good Winnipeg defense in this one. Really excited to see how this one turns out, and if Hamilton can carry forward any momentum, any positive momentum, that is, from last week's game against the Redblacks. But ultimately, I don't see that happening. I'm going to take the Winnipeg Blue Bombers to win this game 35-21 at Tim Hortons Field and move on to 11-3 on the 2023 season. Now closing out Week 15 in the CFL, Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern, we have the 3-9 Ottawa Redblacks visiting the 8-4 BC Lions. And I'll be honest, this is probably the game I'm least looking forward to this week, just because watching Ottawa the last several weeks has just kind of been a drag, and how they haven't been able to muster any positive momentum. I feel like almost every other team in the league has had something positive happen over the last month or so, but Ottawa's just on this really rough stretch recently that they haven't been able to close out and get a win since those big dramatic victories way back when they beat Calgary and Winnipeg in overtime. So really interested to see what happens with Ottawa in this one, but losing a lot of faith in them, and honestly I think they're a little too far to the playoff conversation at this point, considering they lost the season series to Hamilton, and they're already 2 games behind them as well. So we'll see what happens with the rest of their season. But in terms of this game, I think that the Lions, coming off the bye week last week, I think that they'll be very well rested, obviously. They're a much more explosive team than the Redblacks are. I think that's going to play a big role in this one. And in terms of the players I'm watching for in this one, I'm going to look at the defensive side, actually. For Ottawa, I'm going with Adam Auclair, linebacker. Guy they selected in the first round a couple of years ago has really impressed me this season. I think they actually have a pretty good linebacking duo there with Santos Knox and Auclair, so I think that's a bright spot for Ottawa. Just the other aspects of the teams, particularly offensively, they need to improve on. And then for BC, I'm going with another Canadian here in defensive end, Matthew Betts, who I believe is the main contender to Brady Oliveira for most outstanding Canadian in the CFL this season. It's unfortunate that they both are in the West Division, because these guys will not be the 2 finalists. Unfortunately, with the way the CFL does it, it's East and West, so that's unfortunate. But I think Betts is having one of the true great Canadian seasons we've seen from a defensive lineman in quite some time, and I think he has 12 sacks on the year, so if he can get 15 sacks, I can't even remember the last time a Canadian defensive lineman finished with 15 or more sacks in the CFL season. So really impressed with Betts this year. And then in terms of who is going to win this game, like I said, I think it's kind of a mismatch here. I think BC, with that rest coming off of the bye week last week, the much more explosive team as it is, Ottawa just kind of down in the dumps. Ultimately, I just think that BC just has too much firepower for them, and I'm going to take the Lions to win 31-16 and go on to 9-4 on the season. But with that said, that is just your preview for Week 15 of the 2023 CFL season. Be sure to let me know your picks down below. And with that said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.